welcome to the Labor Force Podcast. Stories of the working class in a time of renewed labor militancy and awareness that capitalism is a rotten deal. I'm your host, Mike Strugan, proud member of New York State United Teachers. All right, let's get right into what's been a hell of a couple of weeks for honestly just basic worker rights. And I say basic with a bit of an eye roll because these rights have been yanked, granted, and tugged around so much, you kind of forget they were supposed to be the bare minimum. So big news out of D.C. The House just passed the Protect America's Workforce Act. That's H.R. 2550 if you're keeping score. This thing rolls back a whole bunch of Trump-era executive orders that basically froze out most federal employees from real collective bargaining. Not just joining a union for show, but actually negotiating contracts that stick. The vote was 231 to 195, so not exactly a landslide, but enough of a majority that folks are talking about it as like a real shift. Now this isn't law yet, eyes on the Senate as always, and I gotta say, it's insane how rare it is these days to see bipartisan anything, but thanks to House folks like Jared Golden and Brian Fitzpatrick, plus some Republicans in the Senate, there's at least a shot. If you've ever worked in civil service, like Veterans Care, Social Security, disaster response, whatever, this is for you. Protecting the ability to bargain isn't just a technical thing. It's about having a voice when it matters. And Utah did something I didn't see coming. They repealed the collective bargaining ban for public sector workers. Teachers, firefighters, police, all could be union members, but that law basically kneecapped their ability to actually get results from it. There was no real bargaining power. After massive protest, seriously, thousands out in the streets, even in freezing weather, the state legislature turned around and scrapped what one of the experts called the most restrictive labor law in the U.S. The Republican governor, Spencer Cox, was on board for the repeal, which just, wow. I'm not saying Utah's turned into a labor stronghold overnight, but you gotta give credit when a conservative state admits it went too far. And yeah, there's totally a political angle, with next year's midterms and all, but whatever makes it happen, right? I mean, look, that shows you right there the power of unity in the face of these bullshit anti-union laws. This one went even further than Wisconsin back in the day with Act 10, which left a carve-out for police and firefighters who had supported that Viper Scott Walker. No carve-out at all with this one, so good on Utah for doing the right and rational thing. Speaking as a public sector worker with one of the strongest statewide unions in the country here in New York, having a true voice, with that voice in writing, counts for everything. Of course, for every step forward, it feels like we get a reminder from the other side of the tracks just how much work is left. Take this one. New York Attorney General Letitia James just filed a lawsuit against UPS, saying they stole something like $45 million in wages from seasonal workers over 6 years. The claims are brutal. Forcing people to work off the clock, screwing around with timekeeping systems, clocking people in late, cutting pay for lunch breaks they never even took. These are folks busting it during the holiday rush, doing the stuff that frankly keeps the economy going while the rest of us just order presents online. UPS, for their part, says what they always fucking say. They take the accusations seriously and pay industry-leading wages. Maybe they do for some, but apparently not the seasonal folks working ridiculous hours for peanuts. The lawsuit's after back pay, penalties, the whole package. If you've ever tried to fight wage theft, you know it's an exhausting slog. Companies have armies of lawyers, complicated systems, and most workers just want to keep their job, not start a legal war. Then, like I said, the hits just keep coming. TSA is once again trying to axe collective bargaining for nearly 50,000 of its security officers. They tried this already and a judge blocked them, but they're back at it. Their trick this time is claiming national security means these folks shouldn't have union protection. In reality, well, let's be clear, most unionized security workers still do their job. Unions don't mean people stop caring about security. That's always been a weak argument. The AFGE isn't letting this slide. Says it's illegal, a clear violation of the preliminary injunction. The agency plans to toss out the contract in January, replacing it with what they're calling a security-focused framework. Look, bureaucratic talk aside, it means less power for workers, and we've all seen how that plays out before. So when you're thinking about barriers people face fighting wage theft or union busting, it's not just money, though that's a huge piece. It's fear, retaliation, time and stress burn people out. These big companies and agencies know exactly how to make your life miserable, tie you up in knots, and delay everything until most folks drop out from exhaustion or desperation. The only thing that beats that is solidarity and some stubbornness. Legal tools help, lawsuits, injunctions, whistleblower protections, but at the end of the day, if you don't have a bunch of people ready to stand up with you, and maybe a little media attention, it's so easy for companies to just steamroll workers right into the ground.
Is preparing for. This is where we have real power in society to shut it down to get our demands met. General strike! General strike! General strike! General strike! General strike! General strike!
Now to the fight back. In York, Pennsylvania, and Minden, Idaho, a bunch of Starbucks baristas got up before the sun, braved the cold, and hit picket lines outside Starbucks roasting and distribution sites. And this wasn't just waving signs for a headline. They blocked truck entrances, risked arrest, and 32 of them got taken into custody for trespassing. It's gutsy shit. Their message, basically, wherever Starbucks is, we'll be there too. They want a fair contract, better staffing, and for the company to quit dodging the table. Starbucks says, of course they do, that 99% of stores are open and that they're ready to talk, but those folks out there aren't getting arrested for fun. They're desperate to be heard. On a more triumphant note, the Cisco Teamsters in Northern California and Nevada just ratified their first ever regional contract. This is a massive deal. 34% wage hike, pension improvements, better health care, real protections against automation. Now, none of that happened because Cisco just woke up feeling generous one day. The Teamsters made it clear they'd strike if Cisco didn't step up, and that credible strike forced Cisco back to the bargaining table for real. You don't get results like that by hoping for change. You organize, you show the company you're serious, and suddenly your crazy demands become the new normal. Listen to Joe Silva, steward at Local 853. He called it the strongest contract we've ever negotiated. That changes lives, full stop. And then out in LA, at the 2025 Game Awards, United Video Game Workers, associated with the Communications Workers of America, staged a protest right outside the Peacock Theater. Their beef? The industry's been hit with over 40,000 layoffs recently. There's a real threat from AI putting jobs on the chopping block, and companies are putting creative people through the ringer for the sake of executive bonuses. These aren't just tech problems, they're worker problems. Folks held up signs like, "We're done playing," and called out companies for, quote, strip mining the industry. That message, better worker rights, mean better games, more creativity, and less, burnout and exploitation. People sometimes act like labor issues are some factory thing from the 1930s, but the fight is everywhere, from coffee shops to warehouses to video games and more. That's the state of labor in America. Maybe tired, definitely angry, but still fighting. So we're looking at this weird moment in the labor movement where you feel like things are really taking off and then bam, you hit a brick wall. I want to start with a story that landed right in the middle of this push-pull. Something that happened in Philadelphia, actually, at a Whole Foods store. Picture it, cold January, right downtown, and for the first time ever, workers managed to win a union vote at one of the company's more than 500 locations. It was huge news. People were buzzing, drawing inspiration from what Starbucks workers achieved, all those successful union drives, even in the face of big-time resistance. There was this real sense, history in the making. But of course, Whole Foods is owned by Amazon, and Amazon's got a PhD in union busting. They know every trick in the book. Legal roadblocks, objections, appeals, just dragging things out. Instead of just accepting the results, they did what so many big corporations do. Filed objections, started blaming the union for supposedly illegally interfering during the vote process. I mean, none of this is surprising. The playbook's always the same. But for the folks who actually put their necks out to build this union, suddenly they got stuck in this legal limbo. And all this uncertainty, a lot of it comes down to what's been happening at the NLRB, the Federal Labor Board. That's the agency that's supposed to protect workers, settle these disputes, enforce labor law, except right now, it's basically running on fumes. Just after Trump took office again, he fired Gwen Wilcox from the board. That's not business as usual. See, the NLRB needs at least 3 members on its 5-person board to make any rulings, and after Wilcox was kicked out, the board lost its quorum. So cases like that Whole Foods union drive, they're just gathering dust at the top of the pile. No way to move forward. The numbers say it all. In just under a year since Trump came back, the board has managed, 6 decisions? Compared to about 150 the previous year. Meanwhile, workers and unions are caught in the wait. Whole Foods? Workers who risked everything for a vote are still stuck hanging because the company appealed and now it just sits at the jammed-up NLRB. Inside the agency, morale is shot. I mean, folks who work there say they've just been ground down by years of hostility. Low staff, backlogs piling up, the whole thing on the edge. Some employees just left. Retirement, frustration, or saw the writing on the wall and took a private sector gig. There's a sort of gallows humor almost. One lawyer joked that they're just happy the place hasn't gotten shut down altogether. And while the acting general counsel for the NLRB, William Cohen, says things aren't crippled, he compared running the agency to a family who can't afford Disney World. Most of the rank and file aren't buying it. They see a board gutted, budgets cut, decisions around worker protections rolled back, and a legal system where companies win by delay. There was also this bombshell from the Fifth Circuit appeal, a ruling that said basically the NLRB might actually be unconstitutional. So until the courts sort it out, employers can dodge trials by just pulling procedural levers. If you're a worker, that means you can do everything right, build a rock-solid case, and it just never gets heard. For a country that passed the National Labor Relations Act back in 1935 to guarantee these rights, at this point, it's like those rights are on paper only. The weird thing is, while all that's happening at the federal level, total paralysis. Some states have decided they're not going to just stand by and watch. California, New York, a few others, they're passing laws so their own labor agencies can regulate union elections and unfair labor practices, at least within their own borders. And the feds, the NLRB, even after being gutted, is actually challenging some of these state laws, which is ironic considering how little the agency is able to do right now. But in places like California, you've got people like Assemblymember Tina McKinnon saying, look, we're not going to wait for D.C. to get its act together while our workers get steamrolled. If federal protections won't hold, states will step up, at least for now. The broader backdrop, we're seeing way more than just bureaucratic gridlock. This is a tidal wave of policy rollbacks, open threats against workers' rights, and now there's a Supreme Court case looming over the very independence of the NLRB. Seriously, if the Supreme Court guts the board or makes it essentially a branch office for whichever party wins the White House, where does that leave the right to organize? Who do you turn to if your boss retaliates or ignores a hard-won union vote? I was thinking about what happens when local and federal authorities end up at odds. If you're organizing at your job in, say, California, maybe you'll have the state at your back for now. But what about everyone else? Will this patchwork hold, or is it just stalling for time? Now let's talk about what's shaping up to be the most lopsided recovery, or maybe I should say transformation in modern American history. You probably heard that old line, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Real talk, that's not just literary fluff right now. So far in 2025, U.S. companies have chopped over 1.17 million jobs. Yeah, that's a real number. 1.17 million layoffs just through November. That's a 54% jump over last year. And if you're keeping score, it's the worst stretch for cuts since the Great Recession way back in '09. And here's what's crazy. Most of these cuts aren't the dramatic, headline-grabbing bloodbaths. It's not these huge company-shaking purges. Instead, it's this steady drip, 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 what some folks are calling the forever layoffs, especially in white-collar jobs, tech in particular. You think your cubicle is safe? Think again. Tech dumped over 150,000 gigs this year alone, in large part because AI is eating away at all kinds of routine desk work. Meanwhile, Wall Street's it's partying like there's no tomorrow. The S&P 500 hit another record this month, closed at 6,827.41, up 92% since the bull market kicked off. The Dow, too, all-time highs. Corporate earnings keep rolling, fueled by all this investment in AI, data centers, and chips. GDP's chugging along above 3%. Half that growth is coming from this kind of turbocharged tech spending, though the jobs just aren't showing up with all this growth. It's like productivity magic. Lots of money, not a lot of new hires. And then there's Gen Z. Man, I feel for you if you're just trying to break in right now. Job listings for recent grads down 16% in a year, according to Handshake, and competition's up 26%. You got 60% of the class of 2026 saying, this job market fucking sucks. I get it. Half the companies out there say the entry-level market is poor or fair. Not much optimism. I'm gonna date myself, but when I finished college in the early 2000s, back then, if you had a halfway decent GPA and a willingness to work, you could actually find something steady. There was always some entry-level desk gig, sales role, or even warehouse shift open. Now it's like you're one of 300 chasing a single slot. And even those starter jobs, they're vanishing as companies look to shave costs and bet on software instead. So here we are. Layoffs up, jobs harder to come by, but markets and asset holders living large. And it's not a fluke. It feels structural, like something's changed deep down in the gears of the economy. And of course, what's driving all this? It's not just companies being mean for the sake of it, right? The central force here is automation. AI and robots, and I mean code. This stuff is rocketing through every industry. I saw a Goldman Sachs stat. By 2030, AI could displace up to 300 million full-time jobs worldwide. Let that sink in. The U.S. is looking at a 6 to 7% impact on its current workforce. I'm not doing the math out loud, but that's millions of jobs, and it's happening now, not some sci-fi future. World Economic Forum has their numbers too. 92 million jobs gone by 2030, but maybe 170 million new ones created in AI, data, or cybersecurity. Sounds optimistic? Sure, but those new gigs are mostly going to require way more skill, often a college degree or specialized training, so it's not a clean swap. The brunt hits people in routine, mid-level digital jobs, data entry, basic analysis, customer service, all the stuff that can be fed to a bot or a smart script. Physical labor is not immune either. By 2029, it'll be economically viable to put robots in all kinds of mid and high-wage tasks, manufacturing, logistics, even emergency services. Cities' projections say we might hit 1.3 billion AI-enabled robots by 2035. Yeah, billion, with humanoids specifically projected to make up 30% of industrial roles in developed countries. These things are already doubling their numbers each year. Payback time for companies? For some, a single month or less. Think about that. A plant in Ohio can replace 200 workers with robots and make their money back in like 3 or 4 weeks compared to what they'd pay in human wages. So when you zoom out, automation isn't just a threat to jobs, it's upending the basic deal. If you work, you get paid. It's not that simple anymore. The ground is shifting quick. So what are we all supposed to do about it? Well, a lot of folks are scrambling for answers. One big experiment in the works is UBI, Universal Basic Income. In the U.S., we're seeing a rush to try different versions. Maybe it's a straight monthly check for everyone, or a targeted payment, or even subsidies tied to specific goods and services. And instead of piling all the taxes on workers, there's this pivot toward tapping capital or tech companies. Let the robots pay their share, you hear people say. But you get pushback too. Regulatory agencies are looking at all sorts of controls to slow or redirect automation. Some states are talking about make work rules. That's literally inventing jobs to keep the numbers up, even when everyone knows it's busy work. It's maybe not sustainable. Politically, things are getting tense. You've got activists, social media personalities, and even some politicians going after the big data giants. The whole ideological map is splintering too. You've got folks who want to smash the servers, others who say we should all adapt and merge with tech, some who demand regulation everywhere, and plenty just trying to keep up. And I mean, there's no consensus. Immigration's changing, so is global trade. Cheaper hands can't outcompete $7.25 an hour robots, so where does that leave emerging markets, or the millions looking for a path into the U.S. workforce? At the end of the day, we're looking at a world where human toil just doesn't mean what it used to, if it means anything at all. It's not a prophecy, but the wind's blowing this way. All I know is the big questions, how we live, how we work, how we distribute wealth, they're all on the table now. And in the meantime, Trump could say all he wanted in his address last night, but it doesn't change the system. It doesn't change the sheer predation of capitalism. For the record, the orange man in the White House just got his worst economic ratings ever. So just in time for the holidays, a new report out here says, quote, New Yorkers lack savings, turn to debt as costs rise. And tell me that doesn't echo from coast to coast. So this new report is out from the Community Service Society of New York, and the numbers are just savage. 1 in 4 New Yorkers, so like every fourth person on the street, has zero emergency savings. None. Not even enough for a flat tire or an ER copay. That means just a minor thing, a busted tire, a rent spike, can throw a whole family into chaos. And it's not just the folks you might expect struggling. The survey cut across income groups, and it found more than a third, across all income levels, are borrowing to keep their heads above water. We're talking credit cards, buy now, pay later apps, or financial help from family or friends. This isn't just about spending on vacations or gadgets. This is the new way people are covering groceries and rent and the basics. Now you might think, okay, it's folks at the lowest rung who are hit hardest. And don't get me wrong, it's roughest for them, always has been. But the report talks about something different too. It's the middle class, those moderate income households that historically felt just a little safer. Here's the deal. They're actually turning to debt even more often than low-income or high-income folks now. The very folks who are supposed to be comfortable are swiping credit cards just to keep the lights on. Nearly 40%, so let's call it 2 out of 5, moderate-income New Yorkers said they're barely scraping by or just can't make the rent and keep up with the bills. And these are people making, say, $50,000 or $60,000, above what you'd call the poverty line. But you can't qualify for most safety nets at that level, right? So what do you do when groceries, rent, gas, all of it's up, and your money's not going any further? There was this case in the report, family out in the capital region, making just over $50,000. You think that's enough, right? But nope, groceries and rent ate up their whole paycheck, so they end up at a payday lender just to cover those last few days before the next check comes in. It's wild and it's kind of scary, because you realize being middle class doesn't mean what it once did. Your wage hasn't kept up with rent or food or, well, everything really, and suddenly regular people find themselves locked out of help because they make too much, but they're still not making enough. Just that definition of stable is shifting for a whole lot of folks. And let's zoom out for a second, because while folks are scrambling to cover gas bills and groceries, there's this much bigger debt story playing out in the background. I'm talking about America's debt, national federal level. Right now we've crossed $38 trillion. That's trillion with a T. Let that number rattle around for a second. And because we owe so much, we're paying more than $1 trillion every year now just on the interest. No joke, just to stand still, not even paying the debt down. This isn't a blip either. The experts are saying this is our new normal, with those interest payments set to climb even higher over the next 10 years, over $1.5 trillion by 2032. What does this all mean for working folks? Well, here's where it gets personal. All this money we're sending out in interest is money the government isn't spending on stuff like infrastructure, public health, or wage support. I was reading this thing by Ray Dalio, the economist, where he talked about the possibility of an economic heart attack. Basically, the system just seizes up because too much is going to pay off the old tab and there's not enough left for anything new. That sounds dramatic but not surprising, and it's kind of hard to ignore when even Wall Street and the Fed are worried. So you end up with this squeeze. Public services lag, wages flatten, and future generations get the tab. Folks are already anxious, and when private debt and public debt are both growing, it's like something's got to give, right? We're all just stuck in this feedback loop. That all said, if there's any faith to be had, it's in the younger generations who want more than what this system has herkily-jerkily provided. They're forging their own paths. Take this young woman here in Watertown.
A first at the Watertown Fire Department. Not a truck or any gear on the truck, but a firefighter. 7 News reporter Riley Jones tells us here tonight she is ready to join the ranks.
All of the same sights and sounds in the Watertown Fire Station today. Fire trucks, scanners, and the sound of work being done.
Just got to be lined up better.
But the city fire station is preparing to hear a new voice on the radio as they welcome their first ever female firefighter.
It's exciting, very nerve-wracking, but I'm excited to prove to the guys that I'm able to do the job. I'm held to the same standard as all of the guys. That's definitely a little bit of a struggle for me, but I was able to push through, and I think just be able to prove myself was the best part about it.
Simpson has been a volunteer firefighter for about 5 years. She says one thing that inspired her to get started was growing up around the station. Her father, Kevin Simpson, was also a firefighter in Watertown. Captain Charles Waugh says he thinks Simpson has a bright future ahead of her.
Those basic skills she already had, so we spent 19 weeks just honing in those skills, finding her strengths, building on those, taking the weaknesses, and bringing her up to speed with it. She did very well, and I expect she'll have a great career from this point forward.
As Olivia takes those steps across the graduation stage on Thursday, she hopes they symbolize a step forward, not only for the Watertown Fire Department, but for women all across the North Country.
I hope that young girls being able to see a girl become a firefighter, chase after her dreams, I hope that inspires them to chase their dreams too.
Simpson graduates Thursday, and the recruit will have a week off. Then she will start her first shift as a firefighter on Christmas Day. Riley Jones, 7 News.
So yeah, this is where we're at. A country where people are working harder, feeling less secure, and watching the rules shift under their feet in real time. where wins like strong contracts, repealed anti-union laws, and historic firsts matter more than ever because the headwinds are brutal, and where the losses, layoffs, debt, stalled justice, union busting dressed up as efficiency, aren't abstract. They show up in people's kitchens, their credit card balances, their anxiety at 2 a.m. But here's the thing. None of the progress we talked about happened by accident. It didn't come from patience or optimism alone. It came from people showing up for each other. From baristas locking arms in the cold, warehouse workers threatening to strike, public servants refusing to be erased, and young people deciding they're not going to quietly inherit a broken deal. As we head into the holidays, I know a lot of folks are stretched thin, financially, emotionally, spiritually. If this season feels heavier than festive, you're not alone. Take care of yourself however you can. Rest when you need to. Ask for help if you need it. And if you got a little extra, time, patience, or warmth, look out for the people around you, because solidarity doesn't stop at the workplace. It lives in how we treat each other when things get hard. The system might be stacked, but we're still here. Still organizing, still fighting, still building something better, piece by piece. So from me to you, thanks for listening, thanks for caring, and thanks for sticking it out together. Happy holidays. I'll talk to you again next year. Peace.